All right, so thank you everyone for joining. Today we have Cynthia, who is a current product designer at Microsoft, and she's going to share a little bit of her journey in product design and how she got there. She's also an alum of the UW Design program, so we'll get to hear a little bit about that and what inspired her, and maybe um, how she grew up learning about design. So, yeah, without further ado, I'll hand it off to Cynthia. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the great introduction. Yeah, hello. I am Cynthia, as Shasta introduced it. I'm like an alumni from the design program in UW, currently working at Microsoft. And yeah, thanks a lot for having me today. It's always like very exciting to see like young students like you guys having like passion and curiosity for design. And I'm very glad that I have this chance to like share a bit of my story. Hopefully it could be some kind of encouragement. I hope, like, also just disclaimer, I was hoping to refine this presentation a bit more, but I was pulled into this ideation workshop that, those kind of workshop always takes up like the entire framework every like week with 4 hours, every day was 4 hours of stuff. So I was like, in case my brain is kind of fried after today's session. Yeah, but anyways, let me get started. Um, yeah, so before I dive into the content, I want to like have a brief overview of what I will talk about today. The general idea here is to walk through my background and how I decided to study design and how I set up my career as a product designer. I thought it was relevant since like to talk about this journey since some of you might be facing the same decision as like you graduate high school and choosing what you want to do in college. And also like as I try to tell my story, I try to like insert as many examples of the design projects I did in like just to give a sense of what it is like and what kind of things you will be doing, and also some tips of how I understand design. Yeah, so let me start with some of my background. So I grew up in Shenzhen, China, which is actually like a coastal city near Hong Kong. I spent most of my time there until like high school. So as a kid, I was super into any kinds of story. So I love reading fictional novels or like comic books. And one of my favorite comic book you can see here at the time was like a comic book from Japan called Doraemon. And that's like I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It probably is too old for you guys, but it's a robot cat that from the future, and then he can take out all kind of products from the future to help the main character solve all kind of problems that he gets himself into. And so I was so into this book when I was younger, then I would spend all my pocket money and like lucky money during Lunar New Year on buying this book. So I would have like 100 of those comic book of all of this like episodes. So I was just so in love with how like those little thingy that he pulled out to like solve all kind of situation was so fun and so creative. And this sounds kind of random here, but it will play kind of important role for how I decided to do like art and design when I come to decision in high school. But that was later. Now I was like, when I was reading this, it was like primary school. Um, yeah, so because how I liked reading those comic book, and then like I started to take classes to learn drawing and paintings along the like with a whole bunch of other things like piano or taekwondo, like all kind of things that as it's quite typical in my community where kids spend a lot of time doing all kind of classes. But for most of those habits, I kind of just give up or lost interest after a couple weeks or a month. And the only thing I end up keeping was my habit for like drawing and painting. I usually like, yeah, I somehow find it really easy to focus when I'm doing those things. But at this point, you might think it's quite natural for someone like that's big on drawing and painting and just would think about, oh, maybe I'll just do art in the future. But actually, it was quite opposite because at the time, I had like zero expectation that it would actually turn out to be something that I will focus on as a career because where I grew up, like the culture really just emphasized so heavily on business, engineering, law, or like medical school, and so on. So the common thought at the time was like, if you pursue art, as a career path, you cannot afford a living in the future. So I was like, in my childhood, I was immersed in such culture that I don't really see art and design as anything more than a side habit. And spend a majority of my time in school, in middle school, for example, like studying math and languages like English. I'm glad though, because now that I can speak well to articulate my thoughts. But again, at the time, I was not like thinking about art as something that I would do. So question is, how did I actually end up in the design school in college instead of the computer science program, for example? The story actually kind of start to take turn, like a different term in high school sophomore year. That was when I came to the state as an exchange student. At a time I was staying at a host family with a host family in a really tiny little town called Logansport in Indiana. It's completely random, but it's like a volunteering program that I kind of just got randomly put there. As I was there, throughout the year, I started to take a watercolor class with a local art lady who owns art studio. And then at the time, she was telling me about her life story and as an artist. So she, like, as I talked to her, I just felt like she has so much love and contentment for what she has at her like point of career, like owning this little shop, and then like even it's small and in a really small town, like she's so happy about it. So this really contrasts with how I was taught growing up in a giant city where people thrive to like make huge impact and gotta be like successful and famous and all that. Like, so it was really a big contrast to see that. And then like that was my first time really recall myself reflecting on what actually define contentment and success. And then do I really want to just follow the crowd where I grew up and then like as a career path of being engineers, or like, well, not saying those are not good, those are great if you love it, you know, like those are great things, but I'm just like, do I just not think about it and go for it, or do I actually have more thoughts? So in an ideal world, if I started this reflection, what happened next should be I figured those out perfectly, and then I decided to pursue my dream as an artist, and I happily live my life forever. But actually, that didn't happen as a high schooler, so I could not actually figure out the answer to those questions. I was just like having a like it's really hard to think, oh, like what exactly life would be in the future. And then I just actually just have a vague intuition after the encounter with the old lady that something was special and she's living quite a different life than what I would live if I just like follow the standard path. Like I just kind of have that feeling that this is different. And then at the same time, as a teenager, I had this like rebellious thought of like I would want to be different from the people around me. So that's how like I started to think into like, oh, maybe I could look into art, which is such like an unexpected field that I would do. And then I look into the science, thinking like it's kind of like a cool area. And then also part of it goes back to the comic book. It was like because I always really enjoyed this like character when he was able to bring out like cool artifact or a product and like from his pocket, like this image you can see, like he's taking all those interesting things like to help people solve problems, and it brings joy to them. And then so at the same time, so at that time I was thinking, well, I didn't know much exactly what design is at the time yet, so I was like maybe that would be fun. So with that thought in mind, I kind of like just went home and told my parents like I want to do design. And very luckily, even though my dad at the time had a lot of doubt in his heart, he did not say so. He was like very understanding, kind of like out of like I was surprised in a sense that he was like that because like traditional Chinese parent, right? But actually, he was able to listen to why I liked it, and then like so what he decided to do is like find his family friends that actually worked as a product designer at the time. That was like 2014. So it was really early on. That person worked at Nokia in Europe, and then he like knew about this field. So that brought me to this person to like learn about what it is like. I think he was maybe thinking maybe I will encounter this person and realize, okay, I'll actually not for me, so I'll do something else. But actually, just kidding. So this person was really helpful in the sense that he like took me in on a route of like trying out my first design project. I was hoping to find a better picture of what this looked like, but this is like something I did in high school, like trying to do like an interaction design project, like imagining I was designing exhibition experience for people who travel. So how do you share your travel experience with other people? But yeah, I could not find a better image because it's way past. But as you can see, like the layout and then all the colors that I'm using and all that is kind of very primary and a very like kind of like a childlike design thing. So I was like, at the time, I wasn't, it wasn't really something that I would say now that I'm so proud of. But at the time, this like the my dad's friend were able to walk me through how it is like to actually define a problem and then like kind of do some research and then analyze how it's like and then some ideation and then finalizing the idea. So I was like intrigued by how this thing worked. It's so different from like a math problem where you kind of just think and then you figure it out. It's like a lot of it's like you talk to people, you actually understand what they think, and then you have some idea and then you kind of talk to people more to figure out is it a good idea, is it working. So like that process intrigued me. So I was like, okay, I think I kind of really want to pursue it now. And my dad was also convinced because I was so into it. So he was like, okay, this sounds like she really likes it, so maybe you can study this for college. And yeah, in this process, like but I started to kind of develop an understanding of design, as you can tell, like, but then I'm still in a very early spot. But I remember this is what like the product designer that was helping me at the time was trying to explain to me what design for he understand that interaction design as. Like he was saying it's beyond defining how things look, because that's like what I was thinking at first, or thinking, oh, I'll just design how this look like and then how it worked, like it just gives some instruction on how it works. But it's like really he was telling me it's the art of designing how people interact with the environment they're in and with other people. Like for example, I was designing the travel exhibit thing, like it was more like thinking about how if a person walking to the exhibition, how does the person feel about this entire environment and what can he do to interact with it to learn about the other person's travel experience. Like and then to understand that there's a lot of process of trying to talk to people around you, doing research and then thinking and reiterating. So that's when I started to be like, okay, the design is actually more than look, and it's a lot about interaction and people. And then moving forward, fast forward, that's like toward the end of high school. So I decided to give it a try to do design program in college. So I I applied it for our school too, and then like a bunch of other university that has like the design program. And I remember looking it up. Yeah, also side tip, when you choose college, and then if you're interested in design program, maybe look into like the course curriculum planning and then like the professors. That's what I did when I was like trying to figure out whether UW is a good choice. I think I was also looking at some other school like UCLA or Michigan. And what impressed me about the UW Design School is that we actually have a detailed description of the curriculum on the website. Because the other ones, I was like, I look into it, there's a description, but it doesn't really tell me what class I'm taking or like what exactly it is about. And like, I think in the UW design program, it tells me very clearly. And then I was like, this sounds really legit. And so I decided to apply for UW, and also because it's a bigger university. So I thought it was other chances to learn about other things like art in general or other like computer science things. So I was like, it's bigger range of learning and different type of people too, instead of our school. So here I am, ended up in UW. And then I find out, okay, actually I need to take this workshop, or not workshop, this class called Design 166. That actually was Karen. I took it with Karen. That was my first encounter with Karen. And then, so this is an entry class to get into the UW program. And then here is just some example of the project that we're doing. We were like starting with some photography project, and it's like, there's a book that we read it, understand the theme, and then take photos, make composition out of it to that fit the theme of the book, to communicate the core idea of the book. So we had like a photographer project, and then we have like a layout design, a book cover design project. Yeah, so that was just briefly what I designed at the time. It was interesting to look at it now. Yeah, so through that first class and with all the crit sessions, crit session meaning like you would print out your design progress on the wall, and then people and then professors will comment, give you suggestions on where you could improve. So through the quiz session we had and all the all-nighter I pulled to respond to all the feedback, I realized design is really an iterative process at its core. Like this is something I were not able to know before when I was in high school, because there isn't actually a lot of people to give me feedback. And it wasn't like such a tight curriculum. It was just a person, like a friend helping me type of situation. And then, so example, a project that looks like this at its final stage actually had to go through an iteration like this to get there. Like this is, I was looking this photos up, I was like laughing because this is me and my friend trying to sleep in the dorm lounge. And then there's like at least 20 of those things that we made, and each of them took like 4 hours because we were not expert. So just know, before this class, I was not expert with design. Even though I did all the like that project in high school, I didn't know how to use a lot of tools. I had no idea, like I didn't have a foundation of the visuals and forms and stuff. So this was a struggle. But you can see like through all the effort, it gets better. So at a time, that was when I realized, okay, so we really need to, if you want to be a designer, what like the first thing to get you into the door is that the willingness to be in the iterative process, like to stay having a humble mind and open mind, to be prepared that the design you thought maybe it's in a good spot, there's something that you have not thought of, and there could be ways that to improve it. And I think, yeah, the key of the learning at the time I had is really never get offended by any feedback, and then really try it out before you see it's not working. And just through that, you train yourself with an eye to see what is better, what is not, like what is the problem. Yeah, so through that I start like, and then just through that class, with this class, I fortunately made it into the program and started to develop sort of like a skill set as a design student. And this is like moving forward with like trying to learning skill, like design skill in a program, to design like form and functions for products or projects that I'm working on. Again, some examples, like this is some of the visual designs class that I was taking. Like just in those projects I'm learning like I think I learned a lot about like visual hierarchy, focal points, or like dynamic composition. I won't go into the details of those techniques, but more like I think a lot of it is designing the visual is not just about a feeling of whether it looks good or not. It's not like, it's also a lot of thinking process behind it. Like on one side, it's the information. For example, on the poster, what is it like before I start putting things on the paper, a lot of time you think about what is the top of the hierarchy of the information that you want to communicate. Maybe like things that you would require the biggest visual emphasis to communicate that it is important. Like yeah, like just laying that hierarchy out, and then think about how visually that would ties into the way you want to communicate information. So that was things that I was learning at the time. And then also on the more interaction design side, I was learning like how to designing the function based on like the needs of the end user. This is like one of those more interactive design projects I was doing at the time. Was like there was a prompt where you have to design any type of thing. It could be anything that helps people understand this color principle, where like if you put the same color on a different background, it looks like different color, but how do you like, but then they're actually the same color. So trying to teach people about this principle. So I ended up designing this game where people will learn this principle and then compare those colors as you play. So that was an interesting experience for me, like just because that when you design a game, you really need to have people try it out, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And also you want to know whether it's fun to play or not. So I was in that iterative process, I did a lot of having my friends here in the picture play the game. And it was really fun to see at the end of it, they like actually enjoyed it. And then they did not want to stop when I told him that this is the end of the user testing. So that was really fun experience. And then more example, this is more like towards later on of the junior year, I guess, beginning of junior year, where we're doing actual interface design closer to what I'm working on currently as like a designer in a tech company. So, but then again, this even though the thing that you're designing is different, the process is similar. You would start with finding out what's the problem, what is the prompt or problem. It's different scenario. Like sometimes you have a prompt, sometimes you need to define a problem. And then you do a bunch of research to understand the problem. And so here, like you can see, like the picture is kind of like what we end up designing. It's like an app for the library to help people navigate to find a resource. And then, but then in order to get that, we have to do like a lot of research. For example, going to the library multiple times to understand. That was when we find out, okay, this architecture is kind of confusing and people are having problems through interviewing like people we met, or like finding things, and then also designing, and then like having user testing after that. And then that's how we ended in the last like product that you see on top of the screen. Yeah, I kind of speeding through all those examples just to give you a taste of how things are like, what kind of thing you can design. So like at the time, I was focusing a lot at first on like developing my skill of visual design, and then also developing the skill of understanding user, like designing the interaction of my product with the use for the end user. But something as I go along the way, I start to learn is that like this is like this thing, design is not just about designing how my product interacts with the end user, but also how I interact with people I work with while designing. I think for a designer, it's very important to think about that as well, beyond what the work that you're doing. Let me see, like before I go into the example, I wanted to give a little bit of context. So I think when I first joined the design program, a lot of me is focusing on improving my skill, like so the thing that I'm designing in front of me. And then even just going through the class, a lot of time there is competitiveness in terms of like whether you get into the program and versus the other people. So there's that comparison process. And then I think I wasn't paying much attention of like people I work with or people around me. I was just so into this work that I'm doing. But later on, as I do more design project, like for example, I was hoping to find a better photo of this, but this is a type project actually in Karen's class that we had to work in a group of 4 to design a typeface. So each of us would draw part of the letters. At that time, the project was really fun, but then throughout the process, we had a challenge where sometimes like people are at different spot of life. Sometimes some people are willing to put in more time, and some are more like, I think this is good enough. And then like, even though we have feedback, sometimes people are too busy to want to focus, like to do more. I think at one point I was like, I hope that we can push this further, but sometimes sometimes the teammates are not responding. And then that was when I actually start to sit down and be like, do I actually just give up, or do I yell at them? Do I just report that they're not being diligent? And then what do I do at this point? So I realized this is also art of thinking about designing how you would communicate with your teammate to make things work. So what my conclusion ended up was to actually, I want to tell them how I feel, like how I feel about this. Like, so I was like texting them in the group chat. Maybe texting is not the greatest way, but at the time it was the way that I thought. I was like, I think we're already putting so much effort in it. Like, it's like if we stop halfway, then we wasted all the effort. So would rather, I was feeling it would be worse for all of us to keep going, to actually reach a point we actually are happy with it. And at the end of it, we will be like proud of what we make. And then this actually worked. I was actually like, I don't know if this is gonna work. People might just ignore, but it actually worked out. So people, I think like the 4 of us got like a lot closer throughout that agreement, and being like, actually, we want to put in more time. And then what ended up out of it was that one of a person I worked with become like my closest friend at this point, like even now. So it was actually, I think that was the biggest fruit that I bared out of the project. The same thing happened when I was like moving on to the internship. So through that time, my times in design program, as I just mentioned, I start to realize more the importance of the people I work with and how I work with them, rather than just the skill that I have. So this is like moving forward in like end of junior year, I was at Airbnb doing an internship. Like I wouldn't go into the detail of what exactly I designed because that gets too complicated. But again, it's something that I remember as the the struggle and the highlight of the internship is that there are people, there is a coworker that I at first find hard to work with because they will be like, don't have enough time for what I am working on, but her role is very important in the project. And at first I was struggling, and then at the time, but then I just throughout the time I learned it to like, what if I try to know her more? And then so we had a lot of side conversation after work, or like just to ask her about her life. And then like just finding out sometimes people have struggles outside of their professional life, and they have a life and their difficulties outside of it. And then just learning about it and like building empathy for it, and then offering help even though they might not take it, help me build the relationship with this person. So this person would be end up, because we had a relationship, willing to help me more even though she's busy. So that's what I was able to like actually have the success with her help on my project. So a lot of it pays off, and then that's what lead to the success also, like of my projects, not just my skill, it's other people helping me along the way. And then like this pamphlet thing you can see at the bottom, it was something I end up designing out of nowhere for the recruiting teams at Airbnb. And then it was interesting because at first it was something that a project that's ongoing, but end up nobody had time for it. I was not even involved in the project. But then toward the end, the recruiter was looking for help for really wanting to finishing this, but all the interns are actually leaving the company at the end of the summer. And then I was like, at the time, I was just thinking like, it seems desperate or like sad that nobody is helping. So I was like, even though my days end in 2 days, I'm like actually not getting paid anymore. I was like, I want to help you, and I kind of want to finish this. Like, not because I was like so the kindest person in the world, but I was just more like, I think it's just more than the work itself. And I felt like it was learning process and also building relationship was important. So I helped her to design this. And this guess what, ended up becoming the reason why I got my second job after graduation. You would never imagine. So I ended my internship, had a thought of staying in Seattle instead of going back to San Francisco. So I really need to find another job. And then I didn't do anything because I was really busy with prepping or like job hunting yet. And I just walked into this career fair, not even from our program, like in the other program, like HCD, which is in UW. And then I walked, like I didn't even wait in line for Microsoft. And then I was, because the line was too long, and I was like, I'll try next time. But at the end of it, when they were like turning off all the light, I walk up to one of the recruiter and be like, could I by chance leave my resume here? And obviously recruiter was not super thrilled by that because I did not wait in line, but she accepted anyways. But at the night, I received a call from the recruiter. She's like, do you want to apply for this position? Please apply. We're interested in interviewing you. I was so confused. I was like, why? I was like, how does this happen? And then the next day I talked to the designer that was interviewing me. She was like, oh, because I saw on your portfolio site you designed this pamphlet for Airbnb, and I saw it in one of the events, and she thought it was really cool. And then I was like, oh, well, I was just really excited, like just thrilled by the fact that how this worked out. And then just such a small action of like something that I was thinking about, just building relationship, would actually turn out to be something that was so vital in my job hunting experience. And then yeah, I went through the interview experience, and I got my job. And yeah, finally here I am with my current job. Long story. I finally got here. And I didn't put too much details of what I'm working on this screen, just because some of the NDA stuff with things that are not released yet. But currently at Microsoft, I'm working on like a writing assistant tool, thinking about something similar as Grammarly, but in the Microsoft ecosystem, like embedded in Word or in Outlook or in Teams. So this is something that I'm working on. And really, again, I think a lot of it, designing this using my hard skill that I learned in design school is really helpful. Like designing the layout, like doing the research. I do a lot of research with user, and then also like getting feedback from my coworkers, just learning, using this experience that I had in school with a lot of the research and design process and feedback, was like were able to situation myself, like find my spot in the team really easily, and then I don't find it too hard. But then I think what also, again, tying back to the interaction with people, I thought what's the most helpful, again, is also what I learned to how I interact with people, like asking questions and then asking them questions, caring about when we have a different idea, caring about where they're coming from, or like when things are not going as the way it is, like asking about the reason why, or like just asking about their life, like the just knowing people's intention more. I think that was really helpful for me to like um have people like enjoy working with me in a sense, and then making things a lot easier during my work. Um, and then another aspect is I think what it's new in my current job is that accessibility, which is again in another level caring about the people in this world and how your product interact with them. This is something that I would say didn't have much chance to do before this current job, because Microsoft is a company that really emphasizes accessibility, and it's also having a lot of those users who use Microsoft because like the people who are disabled that use Microsoft product because it has better support. So in Microsoft, this is like an overview of like example of like now that as I design a piece of UI, for example, a card, it's not just about the look and then it's or like the function in a like for regular people, but then also you think about color contrast, you think about those annotation, like how the keyboard, if people who have mobility issue, like they cannot use the mouse, they will use the keyboard, like how do you navigate through those UI element? And the annotation on the right, you will see like how the screen reader will read it out to those people. Like imagine the like how they would use it and understand by listening to the screen user. And so those things are a completely new skill set that I had to learn. And along the way, there's a lot about like trying to emphasize with those people with disability, and then also at the same time learning from people in the company who are expert in this area. So again, this is like I think in the learning period, and then like even designing this, thinking about the people I work with and then people my product would work for is I think it's the key of success to my design. Or I mean, not saying that all my design is successful, but I think it's the important part of getting you there eventually. Yeah, sorry, I talked for really long. And then this is summary of the tip that I wanted to emphasize. First of all, the reason why I was telling my high school story is that don't be worried if you cannot figure everything out, like if you cannot like have a clear answer to all your questions. Like remember my question about what contentment really means in life, still don't have 100% of the answer to that question even at this day. So it's not like we have to figure it out right at the moment, like as high school graduate. Like it's okay. Sometimes it's like don't be afraid to try things out, and then even if it's not 100% sure yet, you can learn along the way and you can try. And even if you be like, oh, I'm gonna go into the design program, but you regret it halfway through, or like trying to get into it, you're like, it's not for me. It's okay. You can pivot in your life. And then second thing is that if you wanted to go into design, be prepared that it's an iterative process, and you really would need to be prepared to have a humble mindset and to iterate and to respond to feedback. And last, what I just talked about, like I think it's not just about form and function, which is obviously important, but also about like how you think about people your product would work for, and then how you as a designer interact with the world around you as you design. So yeah, I think that's about it. Now it's Q&A session. Sorry, I hope I still have time for a Q&A, but it's a long chat.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for like providing a lot of great detail for your personal design journey. And I really loved how you emphasized that, like, that, you know, empathizing with people is really central to design, whether it's empathizing with the people who are actually trying to use your product or the people you're working with. It all matters equally. So, yeah, it was a really powerful message. Um, if anybody has any questions for Cynthia, please unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Okay, so we have Mahi in the chat asking, how difficult was it to be able to get internships and jobs after UW?
Yeah, I would say it's um I think it's hard to give a answer to just straight easy and straight hard. I would say fairly, I think the program really sets you up for success. So there's a part of what the program can do for you, right? There's a part where it provides opportunity. I think our program that does a really good job of like providing, first of all, the skill that you need. I think it's a very structured program. Of course, it's going to be hard because it's going to take a lot of your time. But I think in a very, like, just with all the people I met along the career path, like going to different schools, I think UW is actually the program that has the most structure when you're going into it. Like it builds you up for both your visual skill and as if you want to go into product design, like, and like the design process, design thinking, like you get familiar with what you were doing at work, like for you, what you would be doing at work. So I would say what I did in school was like 80% mapped into what I do at work. So I don't find it hard in the learning gap when I graduate and go into a job. So I think it set up the skill really, really well. And then at the same time, there's a lot of connection opportunity. I remember we had a lot of like guest speaker coming to the program, like there will be product designer in Facebook, Microsoft, a lot of alumni, and then we have career fair as well. So you would be able to through those career fair find like job. Like I find my internship through Airbnb visiting us just to recruit in our program, and then I find my real job after graduation like through career fair in another program. But again, I think it's connected. I think my internship in the internship in the Airbnb really helped me set me up for that success, right? But I will say on the other side, there's only so much the program can do to you, like do for you. Like I would say in order to be able to easily find internship and job through this, you would have to be very proactive. For example, there are guest speakers, but there are people who don't talk to them afterward. There are people who go talk to them and make the connection afterward. That really makes the final difference, as I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that. And then we have Sarah in the chat who's asking, would we need a portfolio of our work in order to get internships and jobs?
Yes, you would. Yeah, I made like at least 3 different portfolios or throughout my years in the UW programs. Like, not that they're different portfolio, they're the same portfolio showing my work. But at first I made it, and I was like, a year later, as my skill grow, I was like, this looks ugly. I designed another one. So of course, you would be working on your portfolio throughout all the years in the program. But don't worry. I think, well, I guess I should not use UW program as this only example, but I think when you go to design school, usually you do projects, any kind of design school, if it's legit. When you go to design like classes, you would do projects like those examples that I showed in those classes. So at the end of the classes, you will have project to put in your portfolio and to build the portfolio. And then so along the years, you would just organize those project and put it in your portfolio. So by the end of your school year, you should be able to have like at least a couple projects that's part of your portfolio. Yeah, you would need portfolio.
Awesome. So I think basically as you go through your years in UW, you're basically building up your portfolio
Mm-hmm.
with the work that you do. And then Mahi is asking, can you apply directly to the UW design program or do you have to take the introductory class?
Yeah, I think you have to get into the UW first, and then after you got into it, it's kind of like all other programming UW. You have to either like take prerequisite like classes or take some sort of exam. But I think UW is the design program is the Design 166 that you would take the class. Whether you get in through the class if you have a 3.7 or up GPA, or if not, then you have another chance to go through the workshop at the end of the class to see if you get in.
Okay. And then Guru is asking, how stimulating or enjoyable do you find your career right now?
I would say pretty I don't know how to say that. Like I think in terms of the job, I enjoy my job a lot. Well, like I would say I'm the type of person that I like my work, but work is not my life. So I would say when I'm working and what I do, I enjoy it, especially because I would say to be honest, I think what you do at your job is probably not going to be as exciting as what you do at school, where you can just have a lot of blue sky ideas. Like that doesn't have to be grounded anywhere, and sometimes it can get a lot more futuristic and different kinds of project. Like you can say I was designing games, I was designing posters, I was designing books, and then apps. But at work, I design mostly digital things. But I still enjoy it in another way where I actually get to know the real impact. So I will hear customer stories of how, for example, I'm doing things about writing. I will see like how expert writers for that writes novel, how do they write and what do they need in the process, and then how our product after you implement it influence their workflow. So I think those are things that you don't see in school project, and I think that's what I enjoy. And then also enjoy working with a whole bunch of different people at work. And then in a company like Microsoft, I think everyone is very smart and very like talented, and I enjoy like working with them a lot. So I think that was the part I really like. But then I wouldn't say I'm the type of person that would be like, I love my work, I'll spend all my life in it. You know what I'm saying? Like I think, yeah, I would say, yeah, even as you live your life, I would recommend also enjoy, like don't put everything you have in your in life into just the career. Like there are a lot of other things that could define you, but do enjoy it. So I guess hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
Definitely. And then I had one last question, which is you mentioned about doing a lot of user research
Mhm.
in your current job. So, is that something you do yourself, or is it like what's your process for doing user research, especially when you talked about accessibility and when you're trying to design for new groups of people whom you might not have encountered before, how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it's good that you guys are thinking about it at this point. Like, I think in order to understand a group of people, again, research is vital, is very important. And then I think I would say, like, first of all, start going into it with a mindset that you don't like, with a humble mindset where you're like actually don't know much about this group, and then identify what are the things that you want to learn about. I think this is how I start. I usually identify a research plan. So what are the questions that I have? And then sometimes I scope it down more. There's so much I could learn about them, but I would define like a scope where, for example, if I'm designing a feature where it's helping people create a summary for their text, then I will ask them about what's their writing process look like, and then how do they usually summarize their stuff, and then if they even need a summary. So I would list a question and then the goal of the research, and then I would usually there's either you do interview or you do like a unmoderated like survey. In company like Microsoft, we have license set up with platform like usertesting.com. So you would be able to set up like with your account, like a test. For example, I need 5 participants. And then they would recruit with a screener to like select those who meet the criteria for the research. And then I would have, nowadays with COVID, we would have Zoom interviews with those people, or we set up a survey and then we send it out for like 200 response. And then the good thing about in a corporate is that you don't worry about whether you can get enough people. In school, it's always like you gotta really ask people to do a survey, and then you like in the company you don't have to. You just pay them to do it, which is great. But then again, like I think there's sometimes we need to be aware of the bias, like our with the current tools that we use, a lot of time we access to people who have more computer like knowledge. And then Microsoft product has a lot of people who are old school and then they don't have so much of like familiarity with how computer or programs work. So that's something we need to keep in mind when we're researching. Yeah, other than that, we also have in a real world company, there is feedback that user give you when they use their product. Like they would click on a link, give feedback, and then complain, right? So those are also source of information that we go to when we define what's the problem and then what are the need. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. I think it really like it shows how design is like it's not just, creating the pretty parts, but it's also about like it's about psychology, and then it's about like data and statistics also. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to shine in like specific things that they might like within design.
Mhm.
So yeah. Yeah, so if anybody has any last questions, now's your chance to ask Cynthia. Um, yeah,
I
I
was
think.
wondering if you think you'll stay at Microsoft, or do you have any interest in, moving on to a different place or like different challenges? Are you happy there? There's a lot of different places you could move around to within Microsoft.
Yeah, I think currently I wouldn't. I'm not thinking about it at this current moment of moving, because I felt like where I am right now is a team that's like rapidly growing, where it gets a lot of attention from like executive and then foundings as well. So it's like I think that's a good spot to like learn because our scope expand with more funding, and then I just we're also so our product will live in different endpoint like Teams, Outlook, and Word. So I think it's nice to have that scope and to see how it's like to designing with so many different stakeholders. Um, so I thought it was still like I think I would move when I'm feeling at a point where I'm not learning anything or I'm too bored of it. Or like I think another side is that I enjoy the people. Like I really like my manager, and I think she's really like someone who I can learn from and set me up for success. So I feel like that's a good setup. Um, and yeah, I would move if I change manager or something. I don't know. I will have to think about it when it comes. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's the great thing about design is like you learn a set of tools, and so you really have like a wonderful ability to kind of go to new places also if you want to, and try different things because you're kind of built with like the tools of learning something new and being able to incorporate that into the design process. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I would say, yeah, I liked about the science status. A lot about the skill comes from knowing the process and knowing the way of thinking about it, how you would approach to solve a problem and what exactly the problem is. It can be very flexible. So like now that I'm working in the space of AI and writing, that's a topic I did not know about completely before graduation, but I didn't find it too hard to dive into it because I was set up with the framework of how I think, but at the same time digesting a lot of information from other people, like, and then you can easily move to like a completely different field. So like easily, for example, going to like a consulting field, like I have friend like working on financial stuff or like completely different stuff, so you would learn a lot of the topic um
Yeah.
applying your skills, so that was fun.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, thank you so much, Cynthia, for joining us today, for giving us your valuable time, probably in the middle of your workday or right after. But yeah, it was a really in depth, wonderful presentation, and I learned a lot, and I know a lot of our other club members learned a lot. So I just want to thank you so much for being here and for answering all of our questions. So yeah, we hope you have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and I hope you guys are like whatever you want to do with your future and that you will have success and fun.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely.
Yeah.
We'll definitely keep in mind, obviously, the wonderful advice you gave, which is, it's all about interacting with people and having that empathy. That's really important, whether you're in design or not. So, yeah,
Yeah, and then feel free to share my email if anyone wants to reach out for like help or anything. Like, yeah, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to help.
definitely. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah, have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.